All right, well, today we are working on upgrading, outfitting, repairing, fixing, changing the car hauler bus here because we are about to embark on our first cross-country trip in this thing. We've yet to take this thing on a big, long cross-country trip, and not only is this trip going to be by far the longest we've done distance-wise, but duration-wise as well. We're going to be living out of this thing for the better part of 2 weeks, so it absolutely needs to be dialed in. Any upgrades that we're going to do to make it more livable, it'd be nice to get them done now. So that being said, it is functional as is, but there's still a lot of things on the checklist to make this thing more livable, more comfortable, more functional, more reliable, and I really don't want to break down. So that being said, we got a lot of work to do to get this thing ready in time for our trip, and we need to get to it. So first things first, though, we got to get this thing moved over by the shop, make our lives a little bit easier when it comes to working on it, because not only do we have to get it ready, we've also got to get the car that we're taking in the back of it ready too. So we got a whole lot of work to get done. Should probably get to it. Let's get to work. This will be the first real cold start for this thing that I've done. Like it's nothing. Every time. All right, we got the vet pulled out, we got the bus in place. It is time to get to work on this thing. We got a lot to do and not a lot of time to do it. Fortunately though, one of our biggest hurdles and the biggest thing that kept this parked for like a year was the generator. And we decided to take this to a local event a couple weeks ago and just use the gas generator since it was nice out and we weren't gonna need to run the AC that much. When we got back, we decided to take another look at it, just see if we could figure it out. And it was, as it usually is, a simple fix. All right, well, we finally really took some time to dig into the generator situation because we were looking up alternatives and none of them were optimal. I would still like to do lithium and solar on this. That's a whole other topic. But I had done some diagnostic troubleshooting before on like the control panel and stuff, bypassing it, and nothing worked. It was outputting 60 volts on one leg instead of 120 on each. We went to diag it a little more today and Josue noticed that this bundle of wires was sitting on the pulley. So he was able to get the top off and get in there, and one of the exciter wires was completely broken. So he fixed that, got it all nicely secured so it doesn't do that again. And generator working great now. I think better than in the entire time we've owned it, because before, if you turned both ACs on, it was at the brink between that and like charging in the fridge. Whereas we really tested it with both ACs on and the microwave, and it didn't even seem to bog. So Josue's the MVP on that one, dude. I was like, we were talking about getting like a ambulance style generator, diesel generator, to put back here, replacing this toolbox, but they're air cooled and single cylinder and blah, blah, blah. We've gone down this rabbit hole many times. And the generator is the one thing that's been holding us up from using the bus. the main thing. There's other things we want to do, but that was like the main thing keeping us from using it. And the only way we were able to use it at the track recently was by taking my, you know, gas house generator. Which, man, we got a new fire lit under us for dialing in the bus, man, because it was great having it at the track. So anyway, jibber jabber, we're back here. We're looking at, there's two exhausts, and I think the generator exhaust is leaking a little bit. So we're trying to fix that, but we're like, where's this other exhaust? We have this diesel heater in here, which would have also been really nice to know about this weekend at the track because it was cold and I was using the rooftop AC to try to do heat, and it worked enough. It got us by, but it would have been nice to have like some actual heat. So we're trying to figure this out now. So it's 12 volts. So we've got the water pump to work. Now the question is, let's see, do I have all the lights on? I guess I do. There's this panel here. We've got engine preheat, so I'm gonna turn that on. And then there's like engine heat and then system on. So we're trying to figure this out. We might as well get all systems working, you know? So yeah, we got the generator seeming to be working better than ever, which is amazing. You know, we've now got our new house batteries. That was one of the things we had tried to change. We basically, the last trip we took this on was also to OSW, and the power was flickering. So we turned the generator off, didn't use it. We realized there was a problem. We thought it might be the house batteries since they were weak. We changed those. That didn't fix it. I did the troubleshooting manual, went through, got kind of inconclusive, and that's really where I left it. You know, since the last trip we took in this thing, we've become very, very familiar with the bus, very intimately familiar. We got a lot more space now that we got rid of that battery box. I've kind of really looked through all of the different hoses back in this compartment. And now that we got the generator working, it's really the simple stuff. That was the biggest hang up with taking this thing long distance, was not having a generator. So now that that's working, we're ready to roll. So that being said, there's still quite a few things left to do. Obviously we've got maintenance stuff. We need to check everything over before we're taking this long trip. We're going to do oil change. Raldo's on his way right now to get filters for fuel filter, water separator, oil, and then so we can do oil change, oil as well. But we also have some other things, some creature comforts that we're going to need to fix if we're going to be living in this thing for 2 weeks. One of which being the shower. So since I got the bus, the shower has not worked. To my understanding from the previous owner, it was leaking. So basically, these are the lines going up to the shower, and that's where they would get water supply, and they've been capped off. So we need to try to determine why they're leaking, fix that, get them hooked back up so that we have a working shower in this thing. Because, you know, I plan on staying at some campsites, and they have showers, but, you know, we're going to be boondocking with this thing a lot, which is why the generator needed to work. And it'd be nice to be able to take a hot shower after a long day at the track. So, yeah, that being said, we've got plenty of stuff to do, so we should just get right into it. All right, so I'm gonna remake these bars that hold the doors open. Now, I'm gonna remake this whole rear door setup, but we need the rear doors because they seal up this back compartment so you can AC it or heat it or whatever the case, depending on the weather. But I'm gonna rebuild this into one big aluminum door that flips up with gas shocks. That's the plan. But we don't have time to do that before this trip. And again, we're gonna be loading and unloading the car, you know, daily. So this process needs to be easy as possible. So basically, I modified these before we took it to OSW, and it almost got us there. It's like, this door is actually solid. It pushes it open enough, but this one, it's not pushing it to its max. And that little bit makes a big difference. Someone has to basically hold this door out while the car goes up. The reason is because they're just too flexible. Like, see, I can bend it. So I'm gonna build a more robust version of these, and then hopefully that should get us doors that hold open all the way. and then it can be hands-free. I can pull the car on here by myself and up and in. That is the goal. So let's get to it. Not to sound like a broken record here, but again, we do really plan on rebuilding this rear door. So these bars, I don't want to put a ton of time into them. I could definitely go above and beyond and make something, really good if this was going to be a permanent fix. But really, this is just to get us by until we have time to take the time to build a whole new rear door, because there's kind of a few things that revolve around building a new rear door for this bus, like adding another winch and all these things. So I want to make sure we have the time to do it when we do it. All right, this is the start of my bar. So I was going to use just 1/4 inch plate here so it's not as bendy, but if I use some angle, it's got all that rigidity, so it shouldn't bend on us. This is just real flimsy, so with all the leverage you have at the end of that rod, it bends real easy. Raldo just got back with the filters. Look at these monstrosities, dude. This is the oil filter. I think like 2 quarts fit in that alone. And then what is this? Is this the fuel filter? Yep. And then the water separator. Boom. So, the main ones. And good old, how many gallons is that? 8 gallons of oil. Hopefully it doesn't take that much. But researching, it was hard to find a conclusive number. It's going to be anywhere from 18 to 40 quarts, depending. So, it is a big, giant engine. It's 11 liters. But they're tinkering with that now. We're using the features of the lights as you hand him a light. No, it's cheating. No, I'm just kidding. We put these updated LED lights in here. It had just one busted out light, and now it's got a good amount of light, but it's still hard to see some of the dark corners. Good old massive engine. So I gotta say, I enjoy welding all different types of material, stainless, titanium, aluminum, steel, but when you've welded a bunch of different things like that and you're bouncing back and forth, it always feels so nice to go back to mild steel, because it is just the easiest, simplest thing to weld. There's no nuance to it. It's just straightforward, especially if you clean it up nice. So I got the angle welded on. I got my hole drilled in it where it's gonna bolt to the bus chassis, and now it's a matter of getting this tab on where it's gonna go in and pin into the door to hold the door open. Now, this is a super critical measurement, because where this is going to kind of determine exactly how wide the door stays open. So I wanted to get everything in place first before I went and welded this to the bar. But as I started messing around with it, I realized we had kind of a problem. Making this bar more aggressive to hold the door open further meant that it couldn't swing back into the bus when you need to close the doors. So then the plan had to change further. Now we've got to have this bracket that bolts to the bracket that bolts to the door, and then have that pin into the bar, so then only the bar needs to swing down back into the bus. Again, this is a good example of, we're trying to do this simple because we plan on rebuilding this door anyway. This isn't a long-term solution, but simple can be complicated. So the other thing holding us up from getting these doors open further is these bolts around the perimeter for this trim. They hit the frame of the liftgate, and they keep the door from opening further. So I replaced all the bolts with panhead bolts to eliminate that as a problem, and between that and the new bar, the door seems to be holding about as wide as it possibly could. However, I was wrong on my choice of using this angle. I should have stuck with my original plan of using the 1/4 inch, because even with the angle, it's still flexy. So I decided to cut a piece of 1/4 inch and just weld it right on the backside. Really strengthen this thing up. It ain't budging, it ain't moving. I don't want this to be where the door holds open the right amount, and then the next time I go to use it, it doesn't, and I end up smashing the door into the wheel of the vet or something. So I gotta make this thing stout and make sure it works, and that works long term. All right, revision 1.0, 2.0, we're at a revision. It should be plenty stiff now. Raldo and Jose got the oil drained, the oil filter changed, the fuel filter, and the water separator. You can see there's the diesel, there's the oil, a little dark. Diesel oil is always dark. And as it turns out, yeah, it's on the high end. Seems like it takes about 40 quarts, which is, for you semi-truck people, you're probably like, yeah, that's normal, dude. What do you mean? But for us, that's wild. It's wild to me when you do 12 quarts in one of these things. You're like, man, that's a lot of oil, 40, almost 4 times as much.
By the 5 gallon.
By the 5 gallon. So my bar should be ready. I'm gonna try to toss my bar back on. I don't like this whole contraption I had to do, but it is what it is. But I mean, this is what we did before. We would have this bungee cord, but to bungee cord it, you have to not have the bar. But then when you don't have the bar, the doors swing shut. So you have to bungee cord it like this, get the car up here, lift the car until these were hitting this, then re-bungee cord it once the chain gets above it, and then do the same process going down. It was a pain. It sucked. So with our door holder opener bars done yet again, we can finally kind of shelve that project and have doors that hold open until we get around to rebuilding it. And it's time for the dreaded oil fill with the 5-gallon bucket. I can safely say I've never filled oil directly into an engine out of a 5-gallon bucket, and the same rules apply that apply with like a quart bottle, where you want the opening to be at the top because that way the air can get out and you don't get that glugging, which is something I didn't even think about until it was glugging oil everywhere, which is a lot when it's a 5-gallon bucket. But once we got that done, we realized we needed some more oil. So in the meantime, working on the Vette, changing up the seat setup, something I've considered doing for a while. The bride that's in the Miata is a different style than the ones we have in the Vette, and the ones in the Vette, you're kind of like meant to be leaned back, and with them upright where I like my seat, the headrest kind of pushes your head forward with a helmet on, and it's the same for the passenger. I've had some complaints from passengers, so decided to shelve the carbon brides out of the Vette for now, and while the Miata's down, steal its driver's seat for the passenger seat, and then use this Halo seat that we had lying around that actually came with the Vette project originally, that inevitably turned into this car. And I did worry that there was a reason why we hadn't used this seat, and as it turns out, there was. It is super, super small, super narrow. So decided to go to the lean-to back here and steal out of yet another car that we're not using at the moment, the E36. It has a Halo seat as well, and the whole idea here is the Vette of all cars really is the car I'd want to have a Halo seat in. So still kind of plan A, but with plan E, we're going to use this seat as the Halo driver seat and still use the Zeta, which is a more flat back out of the Miata, as the passenger seat. However, it was a little bit tricky to get this seat in here. The rails, these solid fixed rails, you got to do a lot of adjusting for different seats. But we got it in, and unfortunately, there's a reason why I always like to run brides in cars with headroom issues. I just don't sit low enough. It ends up with my helmet touching the cage and then touching the Halo part of the seat. So that's not going to work either. We're on to plan freaking Q at this point, and we're going to use the Miata Zeta as the driver's seat. It's tried and true, and the Halo is passenger seat. Got to keep the passenger safe, All right, well, now that we've got the Miata seat out, just to show you a little comparison, because it is kind of hard to see. Don't run away from me, Mr. C. You look at the backside versus the backside, the arch. This is a lot more flat and upright. That is a lot more sucked in, which I think that might actually work out well in the Miata potentially. But I think the problem is when you have it leaned back, on this car we have the underfoot master cylinders for our pedal box. Your feet are up even more than normal, and it's just too much. So this one, trusty steed.
How many brides do you need?
I know, too many apparently. All right, back to work. So even with a relatively small checklist for a car like the Vette, it's still a decent bit of work to do. We need to mount new rear tires, because why take tires with, wheels with worn out tires on them when we're limited on space, and then change every single one of these fluids. This thing is getting all fresh fluids because we need it to be as fresh as possible. And again, it got a thrashing last time, so we want to make sure she's in tip-top shape. All right, Vette seats are in. All fluids changed. We even checked pulled the screen out of the clear view, checked it. Not bad. Looking good. Looking good. So yeah, now speaking of oil changes, we need to fire the bus up so we can check the fluid level and then top it off. We got some more oil. We didn't get enough the first time.
And we did drain the fuel filter, so I don't know how that's going to affect it.
Yeah, that's right. It's going to probably take a minute to start. You know, it's really important to change fuel filters and water separators on diesels, and I would be totally down to change them all the time, but this is the one downside to changing them. Even when you have a normal truck electric fuel pump situation, it's just the process to get them filled back up. All right, well, a little bit of struggles, but yeah, this thing took an honest 10 gallons. Oil pressure was great though. Before on cold start, it'd be about 40, and it was over 60, so definitely probably was due for an oil change. Fuel, that was definitely a little bit of a struggle. I was like, we've got this little port right here. This is basically pre-filter. So when you fill in here, it has to go through the filter element. So that's why I don't like pre-filling fuel filters, because if you have contaminants, if you got dirt and stuff, you're bypassing the filter when you do that. So I wanted to avoid that. So we basically took a funnel and just filled, let it burp until it stopped. Cranked it, it sucked more in, fill, crank, suck more, crank, fill, and then it fired up. And yeah, seems good now. Let it run for about 5-10 minutes and all seems well. So got a little squeak that I want to try to see about, and we want to kind of look at some airlines. That's a lot of stuff. Always, you know, I mean, granted, 2 weeks ago I wouldn't have thought this bus would be ready to take a cross-country trip, you know. Wasn't really in the car, as there was still a lot of upgrades and outfitting I wanted to do first before we did any sort of trip like that. And then, you know, the generator thing. But with the generator fix, like, oh crap, okay, all of a sudden now this is an option. And here we are. I don't know if I told you guys, but the doors work with the new bracket system. Jose's not even using it. It opens them as far as they possibly can without getting in the way of the chains. We should test that real quick. Yeah, all right, sweet. Another one bites the dust. Drop me down. Yeah, dude, it literally like rubs the latch on the way up. Perfect. All right, well, I gotta say, the seats actually work out pretty good as decorations. I mean, obviously I want them to be in a car, kind of silly, but at least as decorations we're making use of them, you know? Shelf worked out. So yeah, the Vette's pretty well ready to go. So what's left still is the bus. Now, that being said, there's a list of wants and a list of needs to get done, and today's the last day. We need to leave tomorrow. So, you know, there's stuff that I really want to get done and wanted to have done before we take this thing on a long trip, and then there's things that we absolutely need to have done and working before a long trip. So obviously we gotta start with the needs, but in case we aren't able to get it to a point where I'm comfortable basically solo taking this thing to Texas for Drift Week, we are gonna develop our backup plan. So obviously plan A is using the Vette, but plan B, we have the F80, which is a proven Drift Week car, and we could just drive it out there. So I wanna make sure that's ready to go. It doesn't really need much to be prepped, more or less, so might as well get plan B ready, and then that way if we need it, it's there. So get this thing out of the way, get the F80 in here, get to work. Let's get to it. So what this car needs mainly is, one, we need to pull some camber out of the rear, but also brake pads, mainly in the front. Oh my goodness. These rotors are a little cooked. I think we actually have a spare. Is this one as bad? Oh no, this one's fine. Yeah, we need to find that spare. We have one. But the pads, so the last Drift Week we did in this car, I grip drove it at pretty much every track, because they were all high-speed road courses. And, I mean, honestly, for me, that was the most fun part of the trip. Hustling this thing around with sticky NT01s all the way around. man, this thing was a monster. And, you know, we'd chase people with the camera on the front, and it was just a blast. But obviously the pads have been smoked for ever since the last drift week, and I have new ones. I just need to swap them. Well, as is the case a lot of times, a lot of car guys and gals can probably relate to this. You don't perform those maintenance and those upgrades until you kind of absolutely have to when you're painted into a corner. And that's the case with these brake pads. I mean, these things have been absolutely cooked since the last drift week. We were driving this car hard doing grip driving. And yeah, you know, almost a year later, or right at a year later, we're finally replacing the pads. I've actually had these pads sitting on the shelf for a while. These are straight up track pads, so I was kind of holding off on putting them on, but you know, now's as good a time as any. So we got our alignment stands down. That is another big thing. I don't think I've put the alignment stands or put the alignment tools on this car since probably the last drift week, and alignments are ever changing. They wear themselves out, things move around and shift, and being able to finally take some camber out of the back here now that we're running a different offset wheel where we can take some camber out is going to be a huge help during drift week for tire wear, not ruining the inside of the tire because we've got camber that we need to fit the daily grip wheels, you know. So we got the alignment done in the rear, got the camber pulled out, got our toes set, and then started working on the front, which we really just needed to do toe. And I decided kind of last minute, I wanted to do the same thing as last trip. If we take this car and be able to grip drive it at the tracks, so that kind of means having sticky tires on the back too, since we always run them on the front, but the rear tires are pretty worn since these were on the other car and got a lot of miles on them, so decided to just put some drift tires on the back and keep it simple. Won't be able to do as much grip driving, but hey, so we did that. We got the coolant topped off. Josue went ahead and dismounted the drift wheels, because if we're going to take them, we got to take them in the car because we're going to drive the car out there. And without tires on them, they're a lot easier to transport since our tires are already there anyway. And then really the last big thing that I had said I wanted to get done before I took this car on another drift week is the springs. The springs were too soft to start with, and then I upped them, but the only springs I had were way too stiff, so I've been meaning to go back down to kind of a happy medium, like Goldilocks, you know, and the bowl of porridge. I needed a middle ground, and it just, again, like everything else, now that we're about to take this thing on a trip potentially, it's time to do it now. Get some softer springs on it, clean up the ride a little bit, just work out those little bugs, fine details, get this thing as close to perfect as possible. All right, well, our backup plan is now completely prepped. Oh, one of those things. It is ready to go though. New front springs, alignment, fluids. But we got this thing loaded up, and obviously this is now turned into plan A. The big thing with the Vette, so couple things. You know, the tradition and kind of point of drift week is you drive your car from track to track. That's the point. But this time I wanted to do it different. Take the bus, take the Vette. A, get good use out of testing out the bus. But B, mostly drive the Vette. I've been wanting to drive that car more because, you know, back when me and Ben were competing in our Miatas, everyone thought these cars were had some special secret sauce. When in reality, they're super basic. They're probably more basic than a lot of the cars, you know, even in the midfield at series like Clutch Kickers. But we drove them a lot, and I think that was our biggest strength and what helped us be competitive in them and, you know, go rounds and all that was the fact that we drove the cars all the time. Like, at any event we drove, it was in those cars. This car, his car, you know, so we were super comfortable in them. So we didn't, you know, it's not like when we went to a comp, we had to relearn the car and get into kind of comp mode. We just had to get into comp mode because we were already comfortable in the car. So I wanted to do that with the Vette all along, but we haven't really been doing that because we've been bouncing around in projects. And anyway, point is, I want to drive the Vette as much as possible. So we're trying to do that. This was a great opportunity, but A, it's going to rain for the first 3 days. B, the bus thing, the Vette is not street legal. I can't register it. So if we had an issue, you know, say we just needed a belt or an airline fitting, and it's 10 minutes away, we have no transportation to get there. Also, you know, there's off days where everyone's hanging out, going, doing stuff, and Vette can't take the Vette. So we have no transportation besides the bus, which, like, you're not going to take the bus to go on an excursion, right? So plus, I've never taken it to a campground. I don't know how they're going to be about it because it is a conversion. So there's just too many unknowns and too much stuff I'd still like to get done on the bus. We're just going to take the Drift Week car, the F80 here. This thing is a great Drift Week car because it's comfortable, but, you know, makes nearly 500 wheel. It's got all the drift stuff, tons of angle, handbrake, everything we need. And it's roomy. We got 4 wheels back here, got everything we need. So, yeah, it's all loaded up. We're taking the F80. It's kind of a shame. It was a tough decision, man. I really wanted to take the Vette and the bus, like almost as much equal parts. Like wanted to take the bus and want to take the Vette. And we hustled to get all that stuff done, but it kind of works out because I don't think we would have gone through the grueling process of changing the oil and the fuel filters if it weren't for like, we have a trip to go on, you know, if it was just kind of, we're working on it to work on it kind of thing. So it's ready to go. The Vette is ready to go. Tires are mounted, everything. So the next event, if an event pops up when I'm back, we can just go. All we got to do is load it up. So, you know, one of those things. I would like to get some more done on the bus, though. Ideally, when we get back from Drift Week, try to get, you know, I want to do a CarPlay head unit and stuff, so we have navigation. I don't have to, like, look at my phone and finish up wiring up the interior lights because it gets super dark in there, and you got to turn the bright lights on and a bunch of little things. So, hope to see you guys for that, for Drift Week, for all of it. But for now, we are out of time. I need to go pack. So, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. I will see you next time. Goodbye. Any closing thoughts?
We tried.
We tried. I mean, we effectively would have got it done.
Yeah. No. There's valid reasons, let's say. I mean,
yeah.
It's not a cop-out.
If the Vette was road legal, that was the tipping point.
That, for sure.
But, you know, we got it done.
In the spirit of Drift Week, we'll drive the car there.
Yep. Yeah, and we're going to drive it all the way out there. We're not towing it. Normally we tow it or have it shipped to the start, but we're driving this dang thing all the way to Texas. It's like 16 hours. So hopefully it makes it there and we have a good time. We'll see. Goodbye.